or MC the proceedings from yesterday into today. So we will get into it so that we do our best to stick to the schedule. We have had really interesting discussions, panels. Yesterday, you guys were rock stars, made it all the way through to past 6 p.m., and that was really impressive. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for engaging. Thank you to our presenters yesterday. I will get into the program for today, but I will start by once again thanking the people that have made this possible. Outside of the audience, we have the sponsors who have enabled us to be at this venue, be in Nairobi, and be able to see each other physically for the first time in a long time. So we'd like to appreciate, under our gold sponsorship, Collins Aerospace, Kenya Airports Authority, who also sponsored our dinner last night, Kenya Airways, the Pride of Africa, and Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Under silver, we'd like to appreciate ASECNA, and under the bronze category, we would like to appreciate Airbus, Astral Aviation, Boeing, Kenya Tourism Board, NAS Sever, and Tradewinds. So thank you to our sponsors. Let's give them a round of applause, please. All right, so today we have 2 presentations and 1 panel discussion as follows. We will start with a presentation from ACC Aviation that will be led by Mr. Andreas Pericleous, and he's going to be talking to us today about whether to lease or own an aircraft. So that will be a 20-minute presentation with a chance to ask questions in the Q&A, and then that will be followed by a second presentation, and this will be on the topic of leveraging on technology to support travel recovery from COVID-19. So what are the insights? And these are going to come from CETA's 2021 Air Transport IT Insights. Then we will also have a panel discussion, and this will be followed by a coffee break. And then after the coffee break, we have something really exciting for you, just to change up the pace. There will be 3 concurrent master classes. And I hope everyone has been able to sign up for the master classes, at least one. This was ongoing at the registration desk. If you haven't already, please go ahead and do so. But the 3 master classes, class 1 is by Embraer. And the theme for this is around aircraft configuration and fleeting decisions for recovery. Then we also have a masterclass by our organizers, AFRA, and this will be a showcase of selected AFRA projects, including AFRA Fuel Project and AFRA UTD Brown Condor Initiative. Then last but not least, we have a 3rd masterclass by de Havilland Aircraft and Jumbo Jet. And this one, the theme will be on regional operators' opportunities for route and network planning. So you heard it here first. Please make sure you attend a masterclass, and then after that, we will break for lunch. So for now, I want to wish everybody, participants, speakers, a wonderful and engaging second day, and I will invite Andreas to come up and give his presentation. Thank you.
My name is Andreas. I come from ACC Aviation, and we're going to be talking today about aircraft leasing and aircraft ownership. So first, let's take a snapshot of the market. Back in the 1970s, the aircraft leasing was inexistent. 100% of the world's fleet was owned by the airlines that were operating the aircraft. In 1980s, the notion of aircraft leasing started appearing in the market, and it gained momentum in 1990s. Fast forward 30 years later, in 2021, about 50% of the aircraft are leased, and 50% of the aircraft are owned by the airlines that are operating them. In Africa, particularly, the percentage of the aircraft that are owned is 52%, and the rest are leased, split between dry lease and ACMI lease. The 2 major types of leases are operating lease and ACMI lease. ACMI lease is basically wet lease or damp lease. The main difference, of course, damp lease is without the cabin crew, usually just with the purser. So in case of an ACMI lease, I think it's a bit, an ACMI lease is when the lessor provides the aircraft, the crew, the maintenance, and the insurance to the lessee, who in turn pays a per block hour rate to the lessor. The operating responsibility, of course, remains with the lessor in this case. Operating lease should be considered a short-term solution for your fleet planning. It will increase your capacity at a very short notice, so you will be able to address demand for the peak periods and then let go of this capacity when you don't need it. So you have flexibility to meet demand with supply. Another important fact about ACMI lease is the fact that many airlines in Africa struggle to operate in places such as Europe because you will need a TCO, or you do not have the required capacity or the suitable aircraft to operate to these places. So an ACMI lease will be a solution for yourselves to operate to geographical areas that you have been unable to do so by yourself. So, operating lease, which is another word for dry lease, is when the lessor provides the aircraft to the lessee, and the responsibility of operating the aircraft will be with the lessee. The lessee will in turn pay a monthly renter to the lessor along with maintenance reserves. Dry lease represents about 38% of the market in Africa, and enables the operator, if it's a startup airline, to gain an AOC. It also enables your airline to dynamically expand without the need of a huge capital investment. And you can, in this way, you can retain liquidity and allow for financial agility. An important thing to consider about dry leasing is the fact that you will be able to have access to new technology in a shorter time frame rather than just purchasing the aircraft, because purchasing the aircraft directly from a manufacturing company, you will end up in a long queue in a waiting list. Then we'll touch upon the notion of aircraft ownership. Aircraft ownership represents 50% of the market, as we've already said. It is the most traditional way of acquiring an aircraft. The airline will require to have 15 to 30% of the capital in its bank accounts to submit a deposit for the purchase of the aircraft to the OEM, and then you will need to go out to financial institutions to obtain your loan. You will require a loan from a senior financier and a junior financier, and they would typically have different interest rates on the loans. Once you're able to secure your loan, then you will be able to purchase the aircraft. Usually, if the aircraft is brand new, it will take some time to get delivered to you, so that's one of the negative things of purchasing the aircraft. On the other hand, purchasing an aircraft directly from the OEM, it will result to usually a lower cost per unit, per aircraft, and the asset can be used as a collateral for future loans or for restructuring your finances. One of the main problems African airlines are currently facing is the cost of finance. The cost of finance obviously depends on where you're coming from, and it is important to touch upon the Cape Town Convention. It is a convention that was signed in 2001, and its aim was to standardize on an international level the registration of the contracts of purchasing and leasing, and to create a strong legal framework that will enable both the lessors and the lessees to obtain loans and sign aircraft with confidence. The Cape Town Convention is a strong legal regime with enforceable legal rights that will allow the financiers to provide credit in countries where they were previously unable to do so, or provide credit to countries that used to be a lot more expensive at a lower cost. By enhancing the legal rights, increasing the availability of credit, and lowering the cost of credit, the convention benefits both the debtors and the creditors. It is a shame that many of the African countries have not yet signed in this agreement, and it creates problems to the African airlines having to borrow a credit at much higher interest rates than countries that have already signed this, because they do not comply with the international standards for the lease agreements. So if we go to a comparison table about the ACMI lease and the operating lease and the aircraft ownership, you will see that the operating lease is a short-term solution, whereas the dry lease and the ownership are longer-term solutions. It is important to note that on an ACMI contract, the lead time will be quite short, so you will be able to conduct all the negotiations and carry out all the preparatory work with in less than a month, whereas the operating lease, you'll typically need about 3 to 6 months to increase your capacity, provided that there is an aircraft available for you. And aircraft ownership is even more complex. It will require you up to 1 year to conclude your contract. ACMI lease is one of the most effective ways to increase your capacity at very short notice, and you will be able to respond to demand at very short notice. Operating lease will offer you flexibility on your assets. It is a more cost-effective solution than the ACMI lease, but it should be considered as a long-term solution. Aircraft ownership, again, is the most cost-effective long-term. It's self-reliant solution, and you will be able to gain operational control of your aircraft, and you will not have to pay maintenance reserves to the lessor. You will need to also consider that ACMI lease, it is a more expensive solution than the rest of the three, whereas the ownership, it is the least expensive, but it requires a huge capital outlay at the start of the project. Now we have worked on an example for a regional turboprop, assuming this turboprop is an 8-year turboprop that's operating in the region. You will see that you will need a break-even load factor for every flight at 74%, whereas on the operating lease is 64%, and on the aircraft ownership is 62%. Having said that, the cost per block hour rate to operate the aircraft on an ACMI lease will be more than $4,300. On the operating lease, about $3,853, and on the aircraft ownership, $3,737. As you can see, aircraft ownership is the least costly type of operation, but it does require a huge capital outlay. If you see, you will require about more than $3 million to purchase the aircraft, whereas on the operating lease, you will just be paying a security deposit of just over $500,000. ACMI is just usually a month of utilization, which accounts to about $400,000. Then the operating margins for the aircraft ownership, as you can see, is about 23%, and ACMI and operating lease is 21%. So they're quite similar in that respect, whereas the operating margins on the ACMI is just 10%. Then what will be your takeouts out of this presentation? It will be that the ACMI is a suitable solution for short term. You will be able to gain capacity at a very short notice and with no significant outlay. It is the most expensive solution of them all. On an operating lease, it is suitable for any airline looking to expand and retain liquidity, have flexibility within their fleet, and you will be able to operate the aircraft at a much higher profit margin than the ACMI. Aircraft ownership, again, is the most cost-effective solution, but the capital outlay is huge, so that will put a strain in your bank accounts. But you will have the opportunity to refinance your asset in the future in case you need to do so. Also, it is important to note that the African nations will need to lobby the African countries will need to work with their governments to find a solution regarding the Cape Town Convention and be able to benefit from the lower cost of finance in case their nation has signed this convention. Thank you very much.